Hi, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is September 15th. Today we're going to hear part one of a two-part article about a book that just about everybody has to read in America in maybe junior high school or high school.
And we are talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, which makes me really sad. If anybody knows me, I am a bird nerd. I hate the phrase to kill two birds with one stone.
Oh, yeah.
I always say to help many birds with one tree, and people think I'm ridiculous.
Oh, no.
But to be fair, this book is not really about killing birds, so it doesn't bother me too much.
This book was published in 1960. Now, if you know anything about the situation in the U.S. back then, this was actually the beginning of the civil rights era. President Lyndon Johnson, he's the one who really pushed for it. Kennedy started, Johnson pushed for it and achieved a lot. We won't talk about the awful things that happened under his administration. It was also the period of the Vietnam War. I was really kind of emotionally involved in that when I was that age. But this was the issue of civil rights, and that was a huge, huge breakthrough for America. Now, under President Lincoln, actually, that was a much earlier beginning. The slaves were finally set free, but they did not immediately have an easy life. I mean, they were still extremely badly treated in the South. They were completely, they were discriminated against. They had almost no opportunity at all to find paid work because they used to do work for free, forced work for free. Many of them left the South and went to the North. In the North, people were not used to having black people around, and they did not treat them much better. They hid it more. They didn't maybe didn't call them names to their faces, but they also had a hard time getting housing, getting work. All kinds of things happened. Although they were set free from slavery, they were far from equal in American society.
If you become a student of American history, and one of the reasons I avoided teaching American history is that the question of race and injustice, that's our title today, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting
Sad.
Because it's such a simple solution. Treat everyone nice. Don't be mean to people because their skin is different. And you're going to live a nicer life. But this is a central question in American history. It is unavoidable. And if you think that race does not play an issue in whatever topic you're learning about American history, you're just wrong. It's exhausting. And it's something that I frankly just got so sick of that I focused on world history because at least I didn't have to talk about this one dumb thing. Just be nice to everyone. How about how?
Right. You broke our rule.
Yeah.
That's okay. We're going to let it by. But if you're white, for a long time, you actually could pretend it was not a big problem. And a lot of people still do, and they want to deny it. And in fact, you will find it's a huge part of American politics. If you want to understand why American politics is so divided, the one key reason, and I just read this recently, although it's not really anything new, is because white people are afraid of losing their position in America. They're finding that people of color, which includes blacks and Hispanics and Asians and Native Americans who were there before the Europeans, they are now growing in numbers. And a lot of people in certain areas, they are finding that white people are now actually becoming a minority in some places or getting close to it. And that is a huge issue. That's really at the root of this political divisiveness that we have.
Yeah, a lot of people are fearful that they will become the minority. And in the United States, minorities are often treated rather poorly or very poorly or even terribly. So if you now become the minority, it's time for some payback. It's time for some revenge. And those people are afraid of that.
In America, the whole system, everything is built around the needs of white people.
Yep.
So white people often don't notice anything unusual. What's wrong? Things are okay. Just work hard. You'll get to where you want. If you are not white, you find out very quickly that you do not have access to the same things. You do not get paid as much. You are often made fun of. People use bad language at you. They bully you more. So things are extremely different. If you have not been in the position, it's hard to know. And so when the author of this book wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, that was at a period where people were still very much in denial, but slowly civil rights were becoming a big issue. So let's start our article. Our title again is Race and Injustice in To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, To Kill a Mockingbird is in italics because it's the title of a book, and our main topics, in talking about this are going to be race, people of different races, different skin colors, different ethnic backgrounds, and injustice. That means you do not get the same equal treatment. To Kill a Mockingbird is a book about Scout Finch, a bright young girl growing up in America during the Great Depression. Scout's father, Atticus, is an affluent lawyer, so their family is suffering less than most people during this difficult period. Scout and her brother Jem hear rumors about a creepy old house in their neighborhood. Nathan Radley and his mentally ill brother Boo live there. Some townsfolk claim that Boo hasn't left the premises in several years. One night, Scout, Jem, and their friend Dill decide to break into the Radley house to see what's inside. Nathan hears noises and fires his gun at them, believing they are thieves. Luckily, no one is injured, and the kids escape. Months later, the children pass by the Radley house and discover gifts packed inside a tree near the house. They believe it was Boo that left the presents there for them.
Meanwhile, most of the white community in town has become furious with Atticus. He's decided to defend Tom Robinson, a black man, accused of raping a white woman. The racist residents of the town assume that Tom is guilty and believe that he doesn't deserve a trial. One night before the trial, an angry mob gathers outside the jail, hoping to kidnap Tom and hang him. Atticus and the children speak to them and manage to disperse the crowd before Tom is harmed.
When the trial begins, Atticus puts up a masterful defense. He says that Mayella, the woman who claimed Tom raped her, is lying. Her motive is to hide the shame she feels about having a consensual interracial relationship with Tom. Atticus puts forth solid evidence that Mayella's injuries were caused by her father, Bob, who beat her after learning about the affair. In the end, however, the jury ignores the evidence and convicts Tom of murder. Shortly after, Tom is shot when he tries to escape from jail. And this is very iconic, very representative of what mostly happened with black people accused of a crime, whether guilty or not, and it still happens now.
There are many, many real events very closely related to this book. The author, Harper Lee, pulls from her life very generously and, in fact, reflects real things that actually happen in life rather than just some fanciful story she invented.
There is a word in American English, lynching.
Yeah.
Lynch plus ing, a lynching. A lynching is going after a black person, often for no reason at all, simply because they're black, and then hanging them on a tree. That is a lynching. All right, back to the beginning. To Kill a Mockingbird is a book about Scout Finch, a bright young girl growing up in America during the Great Depression.
So the Great Depression happened following the stock market crash of 1929. And it took America roughly 15 or so years to pull out of it. Maybe perhaps a little shorter. World War II and the great amount of spending the U.S. did at that time got the U.S. out of that really difficult time for a lot of people. But this is the era we're talking about. Following 1929, there was a lot of poverty. People were out, a lot of jobs. There also were some weather issues that created a drought. There were not enough crops, which made food prices go up. And everybody had a lot of difficult issues.
And banks were failing.
Yeah.
So if you had a lot of money in the bank, it would often just disappear. Scout's father, Atticus, is an affluent lawyer, so their family is suffering less than most people during this difficult period. What came to mind for me was something like the pandemic. People are affected very, very differently by the pandemic in places that were affected much earlier, like the U.S. and Europe and now India. And that is because a lot of people had jobs that they could just do at home. And those people actually ended up making more money during the pandemic because there was a lot of need for their services. For people who did jobs where they had to be present physically, they would often lose their jobs entirely or get sick or have some other problem. It was just very, very difficult for them. Many of them lost their jobs.
The word affluent means wealthy.
Okay, and you say affluent, I say affluent. I think both are fine. Next sentence, Scout and her brother Jem hear rumors about a creepy old house in their neighborhood. So the two kids, that's Scout and she has a younger brother, they hear about this very scary old house in their neighborhood. Now, I don't know about you, but we also had a house like that in our neighborhood. Did you?
We did too. I grew up in a neighborhood where a lot of houses were abandoned, and we'd go inside them. And sometimes you'd see like a homeless person just when they live in there secretly. It's called to squat. Mm-hmm. That's like when you're doing when you're trying to use the toilet and you don't sit down. That's called to squat. And they're squatting in there, and it's scary when you see someone in them houses.
In our case, they had a very, very small, old, kind of dirty-looking house in a large yard. It was just an older couple, and there were all kinds of rumors about them that probably were not true.
The house directly behind my dad had this old guy, and we would play like ball in my backyard, and the ball would sometimes go over there, and we'd have to go to jump over the fence and get the ball. And our neighbor hated this, and so he built this big fence, and then he took and this is real. He took doll heads, baby doll heads, and stuck them on sticks. And
as a
stuck
warning.
Them, it was so scary. Your ball would go over there. You're we never caused trouble. We just wanted to get our ball, and he hated that.
Oh my goodness.
It was so scary.
I don't have that same feeling about the neighborhood where I live in Taiwan.
Yeah.
I mean, if you walk out on a hike, you'll find these abandoned brick houses. They're Chinese-style abandoned brick houses. But you don't have this thing that I think we probably typically have in a neighborhood of single-family homes in America where there is one house that people think is either creepy or haunted or something weird about it. Okay, so there was such a place in this case. Nathan Radley and his mentally ill brother, Boo, lived there.
Why is he named Boo? Is Boo short for something?
I think it's short for something because there are other people who have a nickname Boo. And Boo, I think now also means it's short for a friend or brother or something.
Your girlfriend or your boyfriend. That's what it means. So you could say, this is my Boo. This is a romantic relationship, but usually you wouldn't call your wife or husband your Boo. But you could.
I guess so, but here it's a nickname. Next sentence, some townsfolk claim that Boo hasn't left the premises in several years. Now, as Chris and I were just sharing, for these houses that we think are creepy when we're young, there's often something going on there that we don't understand, and there is a reason for it in this case. People say that he hasn't come out for many years, and that is probably true, and there's a reason for it, because handicapped people, including mentally handicapped people, were often hidden away. They were kept out of sight.
Premises is a plural countable noun. It's always going to have an S on it. It's different than the word premise, which means the idea behind a story.
That's right. So if you have an idea before you start, that is your premise. It's the basis of a story. One night, Scout, Jem, and their friend Dill decide to break into the Radley house to see what's inside. And that is also something that gangs of kids do. I mean, I had different gangs that I hung out with when I was a kid, and we would often do kind of daring, naughty things. And one of them might be to go in and find out what is really so creepy about that house. That is what they did. Next sentence, Nathan hears noises and fires his gun at them, believing they are thieves. Now remember that Nathan is one of the brothers. He has a mentally ill brother named Boo.
So in the United States, it is legal to kill someone that comes into your house illegally, even if they do it by an accident. This is called the Castle Doctrine. This is the law that says if you break into someone's house, I have the right to kill you.
And keep in mind that many, many people in America have a gun in the house.
Oh, yeah.
And they keep it ready. Some do anyway. And just throw this in. People think that school shootings and that these random shootings are really the biggest problem. They are not. If you have a gun in the house, your biggest risk is suicide.
Yeah.
Luckily, no one is injured and the kids escape. So even though a gun has been shot, the kids they were not hit by the bullets. Nobody was hurt. And the kids run away. I bet they ran very, very fast. Months later, the children pass by the Radley house and discover gifts packed inside a tree near the house. Now, this may sound strange. Somebody broke into your house, and the response was a gunshot or a few gunshots. And why would they get gifts? Because
I would not open that.
Well, finally, Boo was recognized as existing because if nobody ever talks to you, you start to wonder if you even exist.
I don't know, man. I still wouldn't open it.
But in this case, it was clear that it was kind of simple things. It was okay. And Boo in that case thought, my God, finally a human being besides my brother was close by. So he was probably trying to make a connection with the kids.
So I have a really good question, but we need to wait until the next sentence.
They believe it was Boo that left the presents there for them.
Okay, so we have the word gift and present, and I want to ask you your opinion. We did not discuss this at all. Which word would you feel conveys more, something that is more expensive, gift or present?
Gift is a more formal word.
Thank you. I have a lot of arguments with people about this. I feel that gift means, usually the longer word in English is more formal, but gift is the exception here. And when you watch car commercials on TV, they'll talk about a gift. But when we talk about small gifts to children, we talk about presents. And I have argued, I suspect that this is a word that perhaps changes or is a regionalism sometimes.
Yes, because in England, they prefer present. They don't use gifts so much in England.
Okay, so this gets to the bottom of it, because I've often had this discussion with people, and we haven't been able to figure out what the difference is.
And where were they from?
These would be Americans also.
Oh, Americans also.
Right, and this is why I suspect
surprising.
Maybe the word is evolving or changing, but I don't have evidence. That's strictly just an idea, and that's why I wanted to ask you.
No, we agree totally. For me, present is a kindergarten word.
Yeah.
Because we use the word present in kindergarten a lot because we celebrated people's birthdays. Gift is something you learned later. It sounds more literary, a little more formal. But gift has an additional problem attached to it for me personally, because I grew up with German and lived in Germany. In Germany, the word gift means poison.
Well, there you go, right? So this strange man that shot a gun at you leaves a gift for you. It's poison. Don't eat it. Run. It
doesn't mean that in English, but because I grew up with German, it's kind of in the back of my mind.
That's interesting.
There are other funny words like that German has affected my... I will tell you another funny one. The first time I heard it in German, I was pretty shocked. Okay, in English, you say to smoke grass or to smoke marijuana.
Right.
In German, it's called shit rauchen. To smoke shit. And the word for shit in German is not shit.
It's S-C-H-I-T-T-E?
No, that would be shitta. It's S-C-H-I-T. And it's the word for marijuana. It doesn't mean shit in German, but when we hear it as Americans, like, oh my God, that's really harsh. That's really awful. So when you learn another language, it will sometimes affect things in your native language, and that's one thing. Okay, we're going to move on to the second paragraph.
Meanwhile, most of the white community in town has become furious with Atticus.
All right, now this is another branch of the story. The story is kind of moving off in another direction. Atticus is the father of the children, and something is going on with him. He is a lawyer, and we already know that they're pretty well off. That's why, even though awful things have been happening, there's been a lot of suffering. It's during the Great Depression. Somebody with a good education and a higher level kind of job, they will be doing better. People are angry now with Atticus. Atticus was originally quite respected as an upstanding lawyer.
He's decided to defend Tom Robinson, a black man accused of raping a white woman.
All right, here we have a lot of problems. Number one, even defending a black person at all is something white people in general would very seldom do.
Now, just very quickly, rape, of course, means to force sex upon a person. In the past, rape actually meant more like kidnap, and that's the phrase to rape and pillage actually means, that you would kidnap a person. You might not force them to have sex, but this meant to kidnap a person. However, this is a very strong word, and you should use it very carefully.
A raptor is a bird of prey. They grab their prey. That was the original meaning, but eventually it came to mean to force sex on somebody. And so the first problem was that he was black. Defending a black person at all was something most white people probably would not do. The second reason is if a black man has sex with a white woman, they had, it's a kind of a hard word, misogyny laws back then. That means, and there, up until recent times, many places still had these laws. That means that blacks and whites were supposed to be separate. They could not have sex with each other. They definitely could not marry. And for a white woman especially, to admit to having sex with a black man was a hugely shameful thing. It was common for white men to have sex with black women who were slaves. That was rape. They owned the slaves, and the black men, even though they were married, they would routinely rape the female slaves. That was not a problem for them, but the other way around was totally unacceptable.
The racist residents of the town assume that Tom is guilty and believe that he doesn't deserve a trial.
Now, This happens even now. If you see that somebody is accused of a crime and they're black, many people will just directly assume he must be guilty. That's a black person.
One night before the trial, an angry mob gathers outside the jail, hoping to kidnap Tom and hang him.
All right, so the mob is convinced. The mob is just a group of people and they're angry. They want to kidnap Tom so that they can actually administer justice themselves. They're afraid that maybe he will go free, so they will hang him first.
And this is the word lynch that you used earlier, L-Y-N-C-H, and this is quite literally a lynch mob, a group that wants to kill a person by hanging them.
Okay.
Atticus and the children speak to them and manage to disperse the crowd before Tom is harmed.
I really recommend that you see the movie To Kill a Mockingbird because you can see this scene as imagined by the director. It's very, very strong and very moving. So it's very hard for Atticus and the children to convince the people to go away and not harm Tom, but they do manage for a while. Our last paragraph, when the trial begins, Atticus puts up a masterful defense. Atticus is a great lawyer. He's very articulate. And he brings in all the evidence that makes it seemingly very, very clear that Tom is not guilty. He says that Mayella, the woman who claimed Tom raped her, is lying. Now, that's going to be hard. If you're going to accuse a white woman of lying against the word of a black man, you're going to have a very hard time. Her motive is to hide the shame she feels about having a consensual interracial relationship with Tom. Now, like I said, for a white woman to admit that she has had sex with a black man is almost unthinkable. They can do it, but it should not become public. In addition, Mayella was overweight and not terribly attractive, I'll add.
Consensual sex means you agree to have sex with another person. It's the opposite of to rape someone.
And that word consensual is extremely important these days. If you are going to have sex with someone, you have to make sure beforehand that it is consensual, especially on the woman's side. If she gives you a very clear yes, it's okay. If she does not give you a clear yes, if she's not sure, then the answer is no. Next sentence, Atticus puts forth solid evidence that Mayella's injuries were caused by her father, Bob, who beat her after learning about the affair. And now it comes out, and that is totally plausible. That means it's easy to believe. A white father finds out his white daughter has had sex with a black man. They were not married. In addition, it would have been impossible anyway, and he beats her. That is an extremely shameful thing. In the end, however, the jury ignores the evidence and convicts Tom of murder, simply because he's black, certainly. Shortly after, Tom is shot when he tries to escape from jail. So the mob is still going to administer justice themselves. They did not agree with the outcome of the justice system.
So think of the topic that we've talked about today. We've talked about race. We've talked about rape, murder. We've talked about beatings at home, mental illness. This was a very heavy book. Not surprisingly, it was also banned in many places. Now, what I thought was interesting, it was banned in both New York, where I'm from, and Minnesota, where you're from. And the reason was that wasn't because the book talked about these difficult issues. It said that talking about them at all would encourage more racism, which
is absurd.
Yeah, that sounds ridiculous.
We have to bring the question out into the open in order to deal with it. And that's what we are now dealing with in America. So when things kind of puzzle you in America now, you're going to see a lot of anger, a lot of accusing back and forth, and still a lot of problems. At the very least, I can say we are dealing with it much more openly now, and that's a good thing. And on that note, we will say goodbye for now, but please tune in tomorrow to hear part 2 of our article. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.